Long before the sound of engines and tall buildings reached the far corners of the world, there was a quiet village resting beneath the open African sky. The road leading to it was made of deep red earth, the kind that rose gently like smoke when footsteps touched it. Along that road stood round clay homes with thatched roofs, their walls warm under the sun and cool when evening winds began to move across the land. At the center of the village stood a great baobab tree. Its trunk was wide and ancient, like the body of an old giant who had stood there for centuries watching the world change around him. Its branches stretched across the sky like open arms, offering shade to anyone who needed rest. The villagers believed the baobab held the memory of the land itself. Under that tree, children had taken their first steps. Under that tree, couples had joined hands in marriage. And under that same tree, elders had spoken words of wisdom when trouble visited the village. One afternoon, as a group of boys played with carved wooden wheels, an elder sitting beneath the tree slowly shook his head and said, "A baobab does not hurry to grow, yet it becomes the strongest tree in the forest." The boys did not fully understand his words, but the older villagers nodded. They knew that wisdom often moved slowly, just like the roots of the ancient tree beneath them. Not far from the baobab stood the village market, a place that woke earlier than the sun itself. Before the sky turned bright, women were already walking along the red paths with woven baskets balanced on their heads. Inside those baskets were cassava roots, bright red peppers, yams, smoked fish, and bottles of golden palm oil that caught the morning light. As the sun rose, the market filled with life. "Fresh cassava! Strong and sweet!" one woman called proudly. "Peppers hot enough to wake the spirits!" another shouted, making nearby women laugh. Children ran between the stalls, goats wandered lazily through the open spaces, and the smell of roasted maize drifted through the air. But the market was not only a place for selling food. It was the heart of the village. If a baby was born during the night, the market knew by morning. If two brothers argued over land, the market knew before the sun reached the middle of the sky. News moved from mouth to mouth, traveling faster than the wind that crossed the fields. And among all the voices in the market, the voices of the market women carried the greatest weight. These women were more than traders. They were keepers of memory. They had watched children grow into adults and adults grow into elders. They had seen families rise with honor and fall with shame. They remembered the stories that shaped the village long before the youngest generation was born. One of the most respected among them was Mama Sod. Her hair was white as cotton, and her back bent slightly with age, but her eyes remained sharp like those of a wise hawk watching the land below. When Mama Sod spoke, even the loudest women lowered their voices to listen. One morning, as two young traders argued loudly over a selling spot, Mama Sod tapped her walking stick gently against the ground. The argument stopped immediately. She looked at them calmly and said, "Remember this, a market without respect becomes a forest without paths." The women lowered their heads, ashamed. Because everyone knew Mama Sod's words carried truth. Among the many children who once ran through that busy market was a girl named Nala. Even when she was young, people noticed something different about her. While other children chased chickens or climbed the low branches of mango trees, Nala often stood quietly at the edge of the village road. Her eyes always looked toward the distant hills where the red road disappeared into the unknown. One evening, as the sky turned orange with sunset, her friend Lela found her standing there again. "Nala," Lela asked, "why do you always look at that road?" Nala did not turn around immediately. Finally she spoke softly. "Because that road leads somewhere bigger than this village." Lela laughed. "What is wrong with our village?" "Nothing," Nala replied. "But the world must be much bigger than cassava stalls and dusty paths." As Nala grew older, the village began to notice her beauty. Her skin glowed warmly beneath the sun, and her eyes were bright with determination. She walked with confidence, and her voice carried the boldness of someone who believed she was meant for something greater. Many villagers admired her. "That girl will become someone important," they often said. But along with admiration came whispers. Because sometimes ambition carries a shadow called pride. And sometimes that shadow grows quietly before anyone realizes how large it has become. Nala's mother, Adissa, worked every day in the market. Before the first rooster crowed, she was already awake, tying her wrapper tightly around her waist and preparing her basket. Her hands were rough from years of digging cassava from the earth. Her shoulders carried the strength of many seasons of labor. Still, she worked without complaint. One morning, while arranging cassava on her wooden stall, she smiled gently at Nala and said, "My daughter, the earth may be hard, but it always feeds the hands that respect it." Nala nodded politely, but her eyes wandered across the market. She saw the dusty ground, the simple wooden tables, the women shouting prices across the stalls, and deep inside her heart, a quiet shame began to grow. She loved her mother, but she did not love the life they lived. Sometimes she imagined herself wearing shining clothes and stepping out of large cars in a city where the roads were smooth and the houses touched the sky. Compared to those dreams, the village felt too small, too ordinary, too poor. One morning before sunrise, Nala made a decision. She packed a small cloth bag with her belongings and stepped outside their clay home. Her mother was sitting on a wooden stool grinding maize when she saw Nala standing there with a bag. "Where are you going so early?" Adissa asked gently. Nala hesitated, then answered, "I am leaving for the city." The grinding stone stopped moving. "The city?" her mother repeated. "Yes." "Do you have family there?" "No." "Do you have work waiting?" Nala looked away. "No, but I will find something." Her mother stood slowly and walked toward her. "My child," she said softly, "dreams are good, but a bird that flies too far from its nest must still remember where the nest is." But Nala had already made up her mind. "I cannot stay here forever," she said firmly. Her mother did not argue again. Instead, she placed her hand gently on Nala's shoulder. "Then go," she said quietly, "but carry wisdom with you." That morning, as the sun rose slowly over the hills, Nala walked down the red road leading away from the village. The baobab tree stood tall as she passed beneath its wide branches. For a moment, the wind moved through its leaves with a soft whisper. But Nala did not stop. She did not look back. And just like that, the girl who once ran through the market disappeared beyond the hills. Days turned into months. Months turned into years. Life in the village continued as it always had. Farmers planted crops. Children played beneath the baobab tree. The market filled with voices every morning. But sometimes the villagers spoke about the girl who had left. One woman arranging peppers would say, "I heard she works in a big shop in the city." Another would shake her head. "No, my cousin says she works in the house of a wealthy man." A third voice would whisper, "Maybe she married someone rich." But no one truly knew. Rumors traveled along the road. Truth never returned with them. And through all those years, Nala never sent a letter. She never came back to visit. She never sent help to the mother who raised her. Meanwhile, Adissa continued working in the market day after day. Her hair slowly turned gray. Her steps became slower. But every evening, when the sun began to disappear behind the distant hills, she paused for a moment and looked down the red road, as if hoping she might one day see a familiar figure walking home. One evening Mama Saad noticed her standing there again. The old woman walked slowly toward her and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Then she said softly, "Daughters are like rivers. Sometimes they travel far before they remember where they began." Adissa nodded quietly. But in her heart, the silence left behind by the passing years had grown heavier than any basket she carried to the market. The afternoon sun burned high above the village, pressing its heat gently onto the red earth. It was the kind of quiet afternoon when even the goats rested in the shade and the wind moved slowly through the tall grass beyond the farms. In the market, the women were arranging the last of their goods for the day. Cassava roots lay stacked in neat piles, peppers glowed bright red in woven trays, and bottles of palm oil caught the sunlight like small pools of gold. Mama Saad sat beneath the shade of the baobab tree, slowly fanning herself with a woven palm leaf. "Today the sun is strong," one woman complained, wiping sweat from her forehead. Mama Saad chuckled softly. "The sun is strong," she said, "but the earth beneath it is stronger." Suddenly, a strange sound broke the calm. At first it was distant, like a low growl rolling across the land. Then it grew louder. A deep rumbling sound that did not belong to goats, carts, or footsteps. Children stopped playing. Women paused with their baskets in mid-air. The rumbling became a roar. Dust rose along the red road leading into the village as something large and shiny approached, its engine growling like a restless animal. "What is that?" one boy shouted. "Is it a government car?" another man asked. The vehicle came closer, its black surface shining under the blazing sun. It was unlike anything the village had seen in a long time. The car finally slowed near the center of the village, its tires crushing the red dust beneath them. For a moment, everything became silent. Even the chickens stopped scratching the ground. The door opened. A woman stepped out. Gasps rippled through the gathered villagers like wind across tall grass. She wore a bright flowing dress made of fine cloth that shimmered in the sunlight. Golden bracelets circled her wrists, and a heavy necklace rested proudly against her chest. Her sandals were smooth and shining, untouched by dust. But it was not the clothes alone that shocked the villagers. It was the face. Someone whispered slowly, almost afraid to believe it. "Nala!" A murmur spread through the crowd. "It cannot be. Is it really her? After all these years." But it was her. The girl who once walked away from the village with a small cloth bag had returned wrapped in gold and confidence. Nala lifted her chin proudly as she looked around the familiar place she had left behind. "Yes," she said loudly, her voice clear and strong. "It is me." Her smile widened as the villagers stared in amazement. "The city has been very good to me," she continued. She spread her arms slightly, letting the gold bracelets catch the sunlight. "I told you all I would not remain small forever." Some villagers exchanged excited looks. "You see her clothes," one woman whispered. "That necklace must cost more than my house," another murmured. Children moved closer, staring with wide eyes at the shining car. "Did you see the seats inside?" a boy said breathlessly. "They are softer than pillows." Nala laughed softly at their amazement. "The city changes people," she said proudly. "If you work hard and know the right people, success follows you." A man near the crowd nodded slowly. "You must be very important now." Nala smiled wider. "Let us just say," she replied, "I live a life far greater than the one I left behind." More villagers gathered around her. Women whispered to each other. Men studied the car with curiosity. Children circled it like birds around a shiny object. "Tell us about the city," someone called. "Do you live in a big house? Do you have servants?" Nala chuckled, enjoying the attention. "Oh yes," she said casually. "Life there is very different from this quiet place." As the crowd buzzed with excitement, Nala began walking toward the market stalls. Her sandals touched the dusty ground carefully, as if the earth itself might stain them. She passed the cassava tables, the pepper baskets, the old wooden stalls that had once been part of her daily life. But now she walked through them like a visitor passing through a place that no longer belonged to her. "Things here have not changed much," she said lightly. The tone in her voice carried a quiet superiority. Some villagers laughed nervously. Others simply watched. Nala continued speaking proudly. "In the city, people do not struggle over small coins like this. Business there moves like a river, fast and powerful." Her voice carried across the market. "The opportunities are endless for those brave enough to leave small places behind." Not far away, the market women watched quietly. They did not rush forward like the others. They did not clap or cheer. Mama Saad leaned slightly on her walking stick, her sharp eyes following Nala's movements carefully. Beside her, another trader whispered, "She has changed." Mama Saad nodded slowly. "Yes," she said. "But sometimes change hides truth the way bright cloth hides a wound." Nala laughed loudly as another villager praised her success. She lifted her wrist to adjust one of her gold bracelets. "You see," she said proudly, "the world is much bigger than this village." Her voice rose confidently. "I belong to that bigger world now." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Some villagers nodded in admiration. But beneath the shade of the baobab tree, the elders exchanged quiet glances. Mama Sada's eyes narrowed slightly. Another woman beside her murmured softly, "Gold can shine even when it is borrowed." Mama Saad tapped her walking stick once against the ground. The soft sound was almost lost beneath the crowd's excitement. But the doubt in her eyes remained. And in that moment, while the village celebrated Nala's shining return, the first seeds of suspicion had already begun to grow. The sun rose each morning over the village like a drumbeat calling people to life. Chickens scratched the red soil, children chased goats between clay houses, and the market slowly filled with voices and laughter. But now, wherever the villagers turned their eyes, they saw Nala. She walked through the dusty paths like someone stepping onto a stage. Her dresses were no longer the simple cloth of the village. Bright fabrics wrapped around her body, deep purple, shining gold, and red that glowed like the evening sky. Bracelets clinked on her wrists. Heavy earrings danced beside her cheeks. Her sandals were smooth and polished, unlike the rough leather worn by the villagers. Each step she took sent small clouds of dust into the air, yet she walked carefully, as if the earth itself should feel honored to carry her. People stopped their work to stare. "Is that truly Nala?" one young man whispered. "The same girl who used to run barefoot past the river," another replied. Nala heard their whispers, and a small smile touched her lips. She slowed her walk so the sunlight would catch the gold around her neck. When she reached the market, the noise softened for a moment. Women selling cassava, peppers, and palm oil looked up from their wooden tables. Children gathered near the stalls. Even the old men sitting beneath the shade of the baobab tree leaned forward to watch. Nala lifted a small pouch and began pulling things from it. Colorful scarves, shiny coins, little wrapped sweets from the city. "Take," she said, handing a scarf to a young girl. "You deserve something beautiful." The girl's eyes widened with joy. "Thank you, Sister Nala." Nala tossed a few coins onto a stall. "For you," she said casually. "The city has been kind to me." A farmer picked up the coins slowly. "Ah, may blessings follow you." But the way Nala stood, chin high, shoulders stiff, made the gift feel heavier than the metal itself. She laughed loudly as she sat among the market women. "You people still wake before sunrise to sell cassava," she said, shaking her head with amusement. "In the city, life moves faster than the wind. Money flows like a river if you know where to stand." One young woman asked eagerly, "Is the city truly that rich?" Nala leaned back proudly. "Rich," she said. "The village is too small to understand such things." Some women laughed nervously. Others lowered their eyes. But whispers soon began floating through the stalls like smoke rising from cooking fires. "True wealth walks quietly," one man murmured. Another woman nodded. "When the drum is empty, it is the loudest." Yet many villagers still smiled at Nala, grateful for her gifts. Not everyone was smiling. Near the edge of the market, Nala's mother stood behind her wooden stall of cassava and vegetables. Her hands, rough from years of work, rested quietly on the table. She watched her daughter. Her eyes carried two feelings fighting inside her heart. Relief, because her child had returned alive. And unease, because the daughter before her felt strangely unfamiliar. That evening, as the sun melted into the horizon, Nala's mother spoke softly. "My daughter," she said, placing a bowl of stew before her, "the city must have treated you well." Nala nodded quickly. "Very well, mother. What work do you do there?" Nala lifted the bowl to her lips, avoiding her mother's gaze. "Oh, business," she replied lightly. "Many opportunities in the city." Her mother tilted her head. "What kind of business?" Nala waved her hand as if brushing away a fly. "Mother, why fill your mind with such worries? The important thing is that your daughter has succeeded." The answer floated away like smoke, thin and unclear. Days passed. Each morning Nala dressed in brighter clothes. Each afternoon she walked through the market with the same proud steps. Yet her mother's heart grew heavier. One night she whispered quietly to herself while sitting beside the cooking fire. "The child I raised spoke with the calm voice of the river," she said softly. "But this one speaks like thunder before a storm." Meanwhile, the older women of the market had begun their own silent watching. These women had seen many seasons. They had watched children become adults, and adults return to dust. Nothing in the village escaped their notice. Mama Saad leaned toward Mama Kemi as Nala laughed loudly with a group of young villagers. "Look carefully," Mama Saad murmured. "I am looking," Mama Kemi replied. They watched as Nala spoke proudly about the city. I own many fine things, Nala declared. Clothes from famous houses, shoes that cost more than a farmer's cow. Mama Sada's brow tightened. Later, when Nala left the stall, Mama Kemi spoke quietly. She says those earrings are from Paris, she said. Yes, Mama Sad replied. But when I asked her the name of the designer, she hesitated. Mama Sad nodded slowly. And when she spoke of her work, she added, her words walked in circles like a goat tied to a tree. The women exchanged long, thoughtful glances. In villages, truth rarely hides forever. And slowly, like clouds gathering before rain, a quiet doubt began to grow beneath the market roof. The days continued to move like slow cattle across the plains, but one thing remained the same. Whenever people asked Nala about her work in the city, the answer never truly arrived. One afternoon beneath the market roof, a young man named Kofi leaned against a wooden stall, curiosity shining in his eyes. Sister Nala, he said with admiration, the city must be a place of great opportunities. Tell us, what kind of business made you so successful? Several villagers turned to listen. Nala smiled brightly, her gold earrings catching the sunlight. Oh, many things, she said lightly. In the city, money moves quickly. You must learn how to follow it. Kofi nodded but looked puzzled. Yes, but what exactly do you sell? Is it cloth, food, land? Nala laughed softly and waved her hand as if the question were too small. Ah, young man, she said, city business cannot be explained so simply. It is complicated. Her answer floated away like smoke in the wind. People exchanged quiet glances, but no one pressed further. In the village, respect often walked beside silence. Yet the older women remembered. Another day, as the sun leaned high in the sky, a group of women sat peeling cassava near the market stalls. Nala sat among them, speaking proudly of her life in the city. Mama Kemi asked gently, My daughter, do you live alone there? For a moment, Nala's fingers stopped moving. Oh, no, she replied quickly. There are many people around. Family. Mama Kemi asked softly. Nala's smile tightened like a rope pulled too hard. Well, business partners, she answered. Important people. Mama Kemi studied her face carefully. And the place you live, she continued calmly, is it your own home? Nala shifted in her seat. Yes, something like that. Her voice, once loud and confident, had become thin like the cry of a distant bird. The women noticed. Later that same afternoon, as Nala stood to leave, one of her heavy bracelets slipped slightly down her arm. She quickly pushed it back up, as if the metal did not belong to her skin. Mama Sad, who had watched quietly from her stall, noticed something else. When Nala walked in her expensive sandals, her steps were careful and unsure, like a child learning to walk on stilts. A woman who truly owns her wealth walks in it like she walks in her own shadow. But Nala moved as if she were borrowing someone else's sun. That evening, the older women gathered beneath the great baobab tree where the air was cooler and the wind carried the smell of distant rain. Among them sat Mama Sad, the eldest woman in the market. Her back was slightly bent with age, but her eyes were sharp like the eyes of an eagle that has watched many seasons pass. When she spoke, the others listened. My sisters, Mama Sad said slowly, I have seen many harvests in this village. I have watched children grow, and I have watched pride grow with them. The women nodded quietly. Mama Sad lifted her walking stick and traced a small line in the dust. There is an old saying our grandmothers taught us, she continued. She looked toward the distant market where Nala's laughter could still be heard. A tree cannot hide its roots forever, even when covered with gold leaves. Silence fell among the women. They understood the weight of those words. Mama Kemi sighed softly. Do you think the girl is hiding something? Mama Sad did not answer quickly. The truth, she said slowly, is like the morning sun. No matter how long the night lasts, the light will find its way through. Another woman asked, Should we ask her directly? Mama Sad shook her head gently. No. When you chase the truth too quickly, it runs like a frightened antelope. She tapped her stick on the ground. But when you wait, it walks toward you on its own feet. The women nodded in agreement. And so they made a quiet decision. They would not accuse Nala. They would simply watch. They would listen to every word she spoke and observe every step she took, allowing her own story to slowly reveal what lay beneath the shining surface. Not long after, the village prepared a celebration. News had spread far across the fields. The daughter who once left with empty hands had returned with wealth and success. Such a thing deserved honor. Women cooked large pots of stew. Men prepared roasted goat. Children gathered firewood for the evening fires. As the sun began to fall, drums filled the air with deep, joyful rhythms. The sound echoed across the red earth like the heartbeat of the village itself. Villagers gathered beneath the ancient baobab tree. And at the center of it all sat Nala. She wore her finest clothes that evening, a bright golden wrapper, sparkling earrings, and bracelets that chimed softly each time she moved. People surrounded her with smiles and admiration. "Our daughter has conquered the city," one man shouted proudly. Another added, "She has shown that greatness can rise even from our small village." The praise flowed around Nala like sweet palm wine, and she drank it eagerly. "Yes," Nala said proudly, lifting her chin. "The city is full of opportunities for those who know how to take them." A young boy asked with wide eyes, "Do you own big businesses there?" Nala laughed loudly. "Many," she replied. "What kind?" someone called from the crowd. Nala waved her hand confidently. "Large deals," she said. "Important partners. Sometimes we move money from one place to another. Sometimes we arrange investments." The words sounded impressive, but like clouds without rain, they carried little substance. Still, the villagers clapped and cheered. Only the market women remained quiet. Mama Saad watched Nala carefully as the girl continued her grand stories. And deep inside her wise heart, a small voice whispered, "When a drum sounds too loudly, sometimes it is because it is empty inside." The drums continued to echo through the night, and the firelight danced across the faces of the villagers. Children clapped their hands, elders nodded with quiet pride, and the air smelled of roasted meat and sweet palm wine. At the center of the gathering sat Nala. Her jewelry glittered in the firelight, and every eye seemed to rest on her. The attention fed her pride like dry grass feeds a flame. At first her stories sounded simple. "Yes, the city welcomed me," she said proudly. "I worked hard, and people with money saw my talent." But with every passing moment, her stories began to grow larger. Soon she spoke of powerful businessmen who trusted her with great deals. She spoke of buildings taller than the tallest palm tree and markets so rich that gold seemed to flow like water. "In 1 week," Nala declared boldly, "I handled business worth more than this whole village has ever seen." Gasps of wonder rose from the crowd. A young boy whispered, "She must be the richest person our village has ever known." But among the older villagers, some brows began to tighten. For each new story seemed bigger than the one before it, like a drumbeat growing louder and louder. And the girl who once sat quietly beside her mother selling vegetables now spoke like a queen who ruled distant lands. As the night deepened, small details in Nala's stories began to move against each other like clouds gathering before a storm. Earlier she had told one group that she lived alone in a large apartment. But later she told another group that she shared a home with wealthy partners. To one man she claimed she traveled often for business. Yet when another villager asked about those journeys, she laughed nervously and changed the subject. Mama Kemi leaned toward Mama Saad and whispered softly, "Do you hear it?" Mama Saad nodded slowly. "Yes," she murmured. "When a story walks on 2 different roads, it will eventually fall." Nearby, 2 young men quietly discussed what they had heard. "Did she not say earlier that she sells luxury clothing?" one asked. "Yes," the other replied. "But just now she said she manages large investments." The confusion spread quietly through the crowd. Not loudly, not angrily, but like distant thunder rolling across the sky. Later that night, after the drums had grown quiet and most villagers returned to their homes, a small group of market women gathered again beneath the great baobab tree. The moon hung above them like a watchful eye. Mama Kemi spoke first. "When she first arrived, I believed her success," she said slowly. "But today she told 3 different stories about the same business." Another woman nodded. "She told me her wealth comes from trading gold." Mama Sod raised an eyebrow. "Gold?" she asked. "Yes," the woman replied. Mama Sod sighed quietly. "This afternoon she told me she works with foreign companies." The women exchanged uneasy glances. One by one, they began sharing what they had noticed. The confused answers. The nervous pauses. The stories that shifted like sand beneath the feet. And slowly a heavy understanding began to grow among them. Mama Sod tapped her walking stick gently against the earth. "When many eyes see the same shadow," she said softly, "there is always something standing in the light." The next day, whispers began to move through the village like the dry harmattan wind that travels silently across the land. People spoke in low voices near the wells. They murmured beside cooking fires. They leaned closer together beneath the market roof. "Her stories do not match," one farmer whispered. Another replied, "Perhaps the city has changed her." But a third voice asked the question many were beginning to fear. What if the wealth she carries did not come from honest work? The words hung in the air like dust that refused to settle. No one said them loudly, but everyone heard them. Then, one afternoon, something unexpected happened. A man appeared on the long red road that led into the village. He was not from the village. His clothes carried the dust of travel, and a small leather bag hung from his shoulder. His eyes searched the market carefully as he walked among the stalls. Finally, he approached an old man sitting near the well. "Excuse me," the stranger said politely. "I am looking for someone named Nala." The old man frowned slightly. "Nala?" he asked. "Yes," the stranger replied. "She returned here from the city recently." The old man pointed toward the market. "You will find her there." As the stranger walked toward the stalls, something in his serious expression caused nearby villagers to grow quiet. Voices faded. Laughter stopped. Curious eyes followed his every step. By the time he reached the center of the market, a heavy silence had settled over the place. Nala stood near a stall, speaking proudly to a group of villagers when she noticed the man approaching. For a moment she stared at him, and in that single moment, the confident smile that had lived on her face for days vanished. Her eyes widened. Fear flickered across her face like lightning across a dark sky. Mama Sod noticed it immediately. "Aha!" she whispered softly. The stranger stopped a few steps away from Nala. "Nala," he said calmly. His voice carried the steady weight of someone who had come a long way for an important reason. "You remember me?" Nala's lips parted slightly. "Yes," she said weakly. The villagers leaned closer. The stranger looked around at the watching faces before speaking again. "I know Nala from the city," he explained, "and I have been searching for her since she disappeared suddenly." A quiet ripple moved through the crowd. Mama Sod and the other market women stepped closer, their faces serious. They listened carefully, like judges weighing truth on a sacred scale. The stranger continued slowly. "In the city," he said, "things happened very quickly before she left." Nala's hands began to tremble slightly. The villagers looked from the stranger to Nala, their hearts beating faster. And as the man began revealing the first small pieces of the life Nala had lived in the city, the shining image she had built began to shake. Like a clay pot struck by a stone, the first crack had finally appeared. The news moved through the village like wind racing across dry grass. Before the first rooster finished crowing, people had already begun whispering. "Did you hear? The man from the city spoke with the elders last night. They say the truth about Nala will be revealed today." Dust rose softly as villagers walked along the narrow paths that twisted between clay houses. Old men leaned on their walking sticks. Women wrapped bright cloth around their waists and carried their children on their backs. Even the young boys who usually chased goats through the fields followed quietly. Everyone moved toward one place. The market. The wide wooden roof that once echoed with laughter and the sounds of trade now felt different that morning. The stalls of cassava, peppers, and palm oil stood quietly, as if they too were waiting. Villagers filled every corner. Some stood with folded arms. Others sat on wooden benches. Children clung to their mothers' wrappers, sensing that something heavy hung in the air. No one shouted and no one laughed. It felt as if the market had become something else entirely. Not a place of trade, but a court where truth would stand before the people. The old baobab tree nearby stretched its great branches over the gathering, its shadow touching the market roof like the hand of an ancient witness. That tree had watched births, weddings, quarrels, and funerals for many generations. Today it would watch another kind of moment. At the center of the crowd stood Mama Saad. Her back was slightly bent with age, yet her presence carried the quiet strength of someone who had seen many storms pass over the village. She lifted her walking stick and tapped it gently against the wooden floor. Clock. The small sound moved through the crowd like a ripple through water. "People of the village," Mama Saad said calmly. Her voice was not loud, but it carried the steady weight of wisdom. "We have gathered here not to fight, and not to shame anyone." She paused and looked slowly at the faces around her. "In our village," she continued, "truth must walk with patience. Anger closes the ears, but calm words open them." The villagers nodded quietly. Mama Saad turned her gaze toward Nala, who stood near the center of the market. Her golden bracelets hung heavy on her arms, but today they did not shine as brightly. "My daughter," Mama Saad said gently, "you return to us speaking of great success in the city." Nala shifted slightly where she stood. "We ask you once more," Mama Saad continued, her tone calm but firm, "tell your people how you earned the wealth you have shown us." The crowd grew even quieter. All eyes turned toward Nala. For a moment she stood very still. Then she lifted her chin, trying to gather the confidence she had worn so easily only days before. "Yes," she said, "I have already told you." She forced a smile. "In the city, I built strong business connections. I worked with powerful partners. We made large deals." Some villagers nodded slowly, though their eyes remained sharp. "My work grew quickly," Nala continued, her voice gaining strength. "That is why I returned with wealth." But something beneath her words trembled like a drum with a loose skin. Mama Kemi folded her arms. A farmer whispered to the man beside him, "Her voice is not as strong as before." Another murmured, "Even the wind can feel when a tree's roots are weak." Nala noticed the quiet looks passing between the villagers, and for the first time her confidence flickered like a candle in strong wind. Then a voice rose from behind the crowd. "Come. Steady. I believe the village deserves the whole story." The stranger from the city stepped forward. His footsteps sounded clear on the wooden floor as he moved beside Mama Saad. The crowd slowly parted, allowing him to stand where everyone could see him. Nala's face tightened. The man bowed his head respectfully toward the elders before speaking. "My name is Ade," he said, "and I knew Nala in the city." A soft murmur moved through the villagers. Ade's voice remained calm as he continued. "The story she has told you is not the truth." The words fell into the market like a stone dropped into still water. Nala's fingers tightened around the edge of her cloth. Ade looked around at the watching villagers. "Nala did not build the great business she has described," he said slowly. The silence grew heavy. Instead of anger, his voice carried something sadder. "Understanding." "In the city," he continued, "Nala lived a different life." Some villagers leaned closer. Others exchanged worried glances. Ade spoke carefully, choosing each word with care. She lived among wealthy men who paid for her clothes, her jewelry, and the comfortable life she enjoyed. A sharp gasp rose from somewhere in the crowd. The bracelets on Nala's wrists clinked softly as her hands began to tremble. Ade continued quietly. "One of those men was very powerful. He provided the house she lived in, the car she traveled in, and the money she spent." Mama Saad watched silently. "And then?" she asked softly. Ade lowered his eyes for a moment. "One day," he said, "that man closed his door to her." The market felt suddenly colder. "When his support ended," Ade continued, "the life she had been living ended with it." Nala's breathing grew shallow. The villagers listened as if their hearts had turned into drums beating slowly in their chests. "With no home, and no money of her own," Ade said, "she borrowed money and gathered the expensive things she still had." He gestured gently toward the jewelry shining on Nala's body. "And she returned here." A long silence spread across the market. "To create the image of success," he finished quietly, "that she hoped the village would believe." The words hung in the air like dust after a falling wall. And beneath the wide roof of the market, the proud story Nala had built began to crumble, piece by painful piece. For a moment after Ade finished speaking, the market seemed to forget how to breathe. Then the silence broke. Gasps rose from the crowd like sparks from a sudden fire. Women covered their mouths. Men shook their heads slowly. Children looked up at their parents, confused by the shock that had suddenly filled the air. "Is this true?" someone whispered. Another voice answered with disbelief. "The girl who spoke of great business." The whispers spread quickly, racing through the market like wildfire across dry grass. People who had once smiled at Nala now stared at her with wide, uncertain eyes. The gold that had dazzled them days before now seemed to burn like something dangerous. A farmer rubbed his beard and muttered, "The drum that sounds too loudly often hides emptiness inside." Not far away, Nala's mother stood frozen behind her cassava stall. Her tired hands rested on the wooden table as if they had forgotten how to move. Her eyes were full, not with anger, but with a deep, aching sadness. Many villagers lowered their heads. Just days earlier they had praised Nala. They had celebrated her return. They had lifted her name with pride. Now the joy they once felt turned into something heavier. Disappointment. A young woman who had admired Nala's fine clothes whispered softly to her friend, "I wanted to be like her." Her friend replied quietly, "Sometimes the path that shines the brightest is the one hiding the deepest pit." At the center of the market, Nala suddenly lifted her voice. "No!" Her shout cut through the murmurs like a sharp knife. "This man is lying." Her hands trembled as she pointed toward Ade. "You do not know my life," she cried. "You came here only to shame me." Her eyes moved quickly across the crowd, searching for faces that would believe her. "I worked hard," she insisted. "The city gave me opportunities. This man twists the truth because he envies my success." But her voice no longer carried the proud strength it once had. It shook like a tree caught in a storm. Ade did not shout back. He simply reached into his small leather bag and pulled out a folded paper. His voice remained calm. "I did not come to shame you, Nala," he said quietly. "I came because the men you borrowed money from are searching for you." A ripple of surprise moved through the crowd. He unfolded the paper slowly. "This is a letter from one of them," he explained. "It asks that the money you owe be returned." Nala's breathing grew faster. Ade continued, speaking gently but firmly. "The apartment you lived in was paid for by Mr. Balwa. The car you drove belonged to him as well. When he closed his door to you, everything ended." He looked toward the villagers. "And the jewelry she wears now. Many pieces were bought with borrowed money before she left the city." The market grew quiet again. The proud story that once stood tall now crumbled like dry clay beneath heavy rain. Nala's shoulders began to sink. The gold bracelets on her wrists no longer looked like treasures. They seemed heavy, like chains made of shining metal. Her bright cloth no longer made her look powerful. It made her look like someone wearing a costume that no longer fit. Even the sunlight that touched her jewelry seemed colder now. The pride that once lit her face slowly faded. The villagers watched in silence as the truth settled over the market like evening dust. Then Mama Saad lifted her hand. The crowd grew still once more. The old woman stepped forward slowly, her walking stick tapping softly against the wooden floor. Her eyes rested first on the villagers, then on Nala. "My children," she began gently, "I have lived long enough to see many stories walk through this market." Her voice was calm, like water flowing steadily in a quiet river. "I have seen young men chase wealth and lose their honor. I have seen proud women forget the hands that raised them." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "Pride," Mama Saad continued softly, "does not grow loudly at first. It begins like a small seed inside the heart." She tapped her stick against the ground. "And if that seed is fed with praise and hunger for more, it grows until it covers the eyes." Some villagers nodded slowly. "A person blinded by pride," she said, "can no longer see the path of honesty beneath their feet." Mama Saad turned her gaze toward the watching villagers. "Our elders once said, 'Wealth without honor is like a calabash with a hole in its belly.'" She lifted her hands slightly. "You may pour riches into it all day, but by sunset it will be empty." A soft murmur of agreement moved through the crowd. Then Mama Saad looked directly at Nala. Her voice softened even more. "My daughter," she said gently, "the greatest pain here is not the lie about your wealth." Nala's eyes slowly lifted to meet hers. "It is the way you turned your back on the soil that raised you." Mama Saad gestured toward the cassava stall where Nala's mother stood silently. "While your mother's hands worked from sunrise to sunset to keep life moving, you returned with pride instead of gratitude." The words were not harsh, but they carried the quiet strength of truth. After Mama Saad finished speaking, no one said anything. The market fell into a deep silence. The wind moved gently through the roof, rustling the hanging cloths of the stalls. The villagers waited. They watched Nala standing there in the center of the gathering, her shining clothes now heavy with shame. And in that long, quiet moment, everyone wondered the same thing. What would Nala do now that the truth had finally stepped into the light? For a long moment after Mama Saad finished speaking, Nala remained standing in the center of the market. The bright cloth wrapped around her body fluttered slightly in the wind, and the gold on her wrists clinked softly. But the proud face she had carried for so many days had begun to crack. Her lips trembled. Her eyes moved slowly across the crowd, faces she had known since childhood. Faces that once smiled at her when she ran barefoot across the dusty paths. Now those same faces watched her with quiet sadness. Nala tried to lift her chin again, the way she had done so many times before. But the strength would not come. Her shoulders dropped. The proud mask she had worn like shining armor finally slipped away. In its place stood a tired young woman whose eyes carried years of fear, loneliness, and regret. Her voice came out small and broken. I only wanted you to respect me." The words hung in the air. Then her breathing grew uneven, and the tears she had been holding back for so long finally began to fall. They rolled down her cheeks openly. She did not try to hide them. The proud woman who once stepped from a car wrapped in gold now stood crying in front of the whole village like a lost child. "I was ashamed," she whispered through her tears. "Ashamed of coming from a poor place. Ashamed that my mother worked every day in the market." Her voice cracked. In the city, people laugh at those who come from villages like ours. A few villagers shifted uncomfortably. Nala wiped her face, but more tears came. "So I tried to become someone else," she admitted. "Someone they would admire." Her eyes moved slowly toward her mother. "I thought if I came back rich, everyone would finally respect me." Her mother stood silently behind the cassava stall, tears slipping quietly down her wrinkled cheeks. In that moment, Nala felt something break inside her heart.